Hello everyone and welcome to Canteen Cup. My name is Scott. Still raining out there. Boy oh boy, I can't remember the last time I've seen this much rain in such a short period of time, but here we are. So I am still inside and I wanted to do at least one more video today in my Minuteman series. And today we're going to talk about knives and talk about knives that I used to carry in the Army versus what's out there today, and just a general philosophy on knives. When I was growing up, Buck Knives and Gerber were the primo brands of the day. If you had a Buck knife, you were good to go. And about that time, a man named Lovelace, who invented the drop point knife, was doing some custom work. Randall made knives were out there, and there were a few others. But in general, we didn't buy a whole lot of the custom knives, not like there is today. And there also wasn't a whole lot of variety as there is today back then. So I wanted to talk a little bit about what I used in the military. Now I was in aviation in the Army. I was assigned to the 101st Airborne Division, and for about 5 years, and 3 of those years I was a member of Task Force 160, or the 160th Task Force, which is now the 160th Special Operations Aviation Regiment. So I was kind of a founding father of that. So we did some really unique stuff there. And then I also spent 3 years in Germany with the 1st Armored Division, where we spent a lot of time in the field, going to and from alerts all times of the year. So I want to talk about what I carried and what I used back then. Now it was kind of a peacetime Army. I was in from 78 to 87. However, when I was a member of the 160th, we were prepared to do lots of real world stuff. And so while it wasn't actual wartime, we were prepared to go to war at a moment's notice, so to speak. So anyhow, that being said, when I was in the Army, I only carried about 3 different types of knives, and they all served me well. The knife that I carried the most, and probably carried it throughout my whole career, was this little Swiss Army knife. And this one is called the Farmer, and it has one blade. I'm not going to do all of this. It's got the bottle opener and the can opener. It's got an awl, and it has a saw blade, which I thought was a great little survival tool because you can saw with it. Now, one of the things that also made this rather special, it is the can opener and the bottle opener, because back in those days we still had lots of bottles that didn't twist off, and I was still eating sea rations, which were in tin cans. So this was a very vital tool. I use this a lot. Like I said, I carried this with me everywhere, probably throughout my career, even when I was flying, when I was in the field, when I was in garrison. But this is the knife I probably used the most. Now, when I was flying, especially with the 160th, I carried a sheath knife, and I was fortunate enough to be able to get one of these. This is a Randall Model 1 with a 6-inch blade, and I bought this probably in 1979, and pretty much if I flew somewhere, this was with me. I mounted it on my survival vest, kind of like this, horizontally instead of vertically, because if you were in a crash, your body gets bounced all around, but there's an opportunity that you can compress your body and stab yourself with the knife. We didn't have Kydex sheaths back then. Leather was it. and so by mounting it sideways, I can maneuver in the aircraft more, and that was important. And there's a lanyard hole on this, but I didn't have a lanyard on because I didn't want to get tangled up in all the other stuff I had in the aircraft. But this was a very good knife for that purpose. It's a multi-purpose knife. It made a good survival knife because it had a good blade shape for survival chores. Plus, it was good for self-protection. We didn't have a lot, or air crews didn't have a lot back then. We had Smith & Wesson Model 1538 special revolvers. And I think they were going to issue us 18 rounds of ammunition. We didn't have the 9mm like they do today. So having a good knife was very important. And then the other knife that I carried in the Army, and this was mainly when we went to the field, because you couldn't carry it in garrison because you couldn't wear it outside your uniform, is I carried some form of a buck knife. This is not the original. This is one I bought recently. But I either carried a buck, this is the Folding Hunter, or the Buck Ranger, which was a little bit shorter than this. And I use this a lot in the field. When I wasn't flying and I went to the field as part of a maintenance contingency, this is what I had, and it did most everything I needed it. Well, it did everything I needed it to do. I never felt undergunned, so to speak. So it performed its task. So I want to talk about knives. As you can see, I have a large range, we'll say, in value of knives. But all the knives I just showed you, they all work well. The buck knife today really does work well. I don't wear one anymore because there's better alternatives out there, but mainly it's weight. This is a heavy knife. This is like 9 or 10 ounces with the case, when I can carry something like this, which is a Spyderco Paramilitary 3. It's about half the weight, the blade's about the same length, and has the same utility. So I just don't like having heavy things on my belt anymore. But if I put this blade on that Spyderco knife, would I be fine, so to speak? Yeah, I mean, the steel on this is a good steel. The steel in these Swiss Army knives, I've carried a Swiss Army knife more than I've carried any other knife, all told over the years, and it's a great steel. It's a great blade. So, part of this Minuteman series is, how can you get into the Minuteman concept? How can you equip yourself as a Minuteman without breaking the bank? And that's really kind of where we're going with this, is you don't need to have all those high-speed fancy steels. Did I need that Randall knife? No, but it was a comfort, and I just happened to luck into being able to get one. But I could have used a Buck Special. I could have used a Kabar fighting knife. Back then we didn't have all the full tang, all these other requirements and such, but they all work, and they all would have done just fine. I don't have any doubt about that. I broke very few knives in my life. I broke a tip off a Buck Folding Hunter once. Of course, I was trying to break into my own truck, trying to go through the vent window, and I broke the tip off. And I broke a tip off of a couple other knives doing something similar, trying to use it as a pry bar. But in general, you don't have to spend a lot of money to get a good quality knife that will serve you well as a Minuteman. All right, knives I use today. Well, I showed you one, that Spyderco, that resides on my belt. I've also used, I sometimes carry this knife. It's a Benchmade, and it's nice and light. It's the Bug Out, and I like that. And I got this. it was an impulse buy, I'll be honest with you. It's not a bad knife, but really I don't always like to have knives in my pockets. I carry a case jackknife, does everything I need it to do. And I've carried this knife for a long time. This is a buck recruit, not a buck recruit, a Swiss Army recruit. It's Victorinox. And what I like about this knife is it's a little bit shorter than the standard Swiss Army knife. It's a little bit shorter, and it fits in my pocket better. And it has two blades. It's got a toothpick and tweezers and a bottle opener and a can opener. But really, what I've discovered is in today's world, we've kind of moved away from cans as far as stuff that I use day to day, and so I don't need those functions anymore. I just really need a blade, which is why I carry the Spyderco now, or my case. But and I have other knives, but again, this is a case knife. This knife, the Recruit, I said a great knife. I think you can get these for around 15 bucks on Amazon, so you're not breaking the bank. Some of the other knives I kind of like. I got this in a trade. This was a Tops knife. It's a Brothers of Bushcraft knife, and when I first got it, I really didn't like it, and now I'm getting to where I like it. It had that coating on it, which I don't like at all, and so I took the coating off. It had a funky kind of thing they use for the ferro rod starter that doesn't work, and so I kind of shaved that down a little bit. I do like the grip. My hands are a little bit big, and I do like the grip on this, and the blade's about the right dimensions for a good utility knife. And I also like that I could get it with a dangling sheath. I do like a dangle sheath versus a solid sheath, because when you sit down or you get in a vehicle with the dangler, you can just kind of push the knife out of the way when you sit down. But I've really come to like this knife now that I've modified it a little bit. And that's one thing too, if you don't like a knife and you think you can modify, just go ahead and do it. I got this in a trade, so I really didn't have any real money in it. But you know, now that I've adapted, I kind of like it. It's probably going to be one of my main knives. I have another knife here, and this is an SE4, and I'm going to say that it's okay. It's not one of my favorite knives. I really don't like the handle. As you can see, it's not as big a handle, and while it's okay, it feels like it's a little bit short, like so that's why there's not a lot of use on this. I may take this coating off and try it, but it's an okay knife, and it's the same steel. It's 1095 steel for those that are into the steel sort of thing. But really, as a Minuteman, you shouldn't really see yourself as getting into knife fights. And if you're going to carry a knife, that you should think about it more for utility purposes. And do you need to have a sheath knife? I don't know. I tend to say I think not. I think something like a buck folding hunter, or the Spyderco, or the bug out, that it would be strong enough to do what you need to do in a Minuteman situation. Now, if you were in a full blown out survival situation where you had to make a fire and you had to baton wood and all this, yeah, I could see having a sheath knife. But in a Minuteman, like I said, this is short term, and you're going back home, probably at the end of the day. So what you need a knife for is a lot different than if you're on a long range patrol somewhere, like an Army Ranger or something, where that's the only tool you have and you're going to be out for 2 weeks. Then you might need something more robust. So I think in general that if you're looking for a knife for a Minuteman, I think a folding knife, if you get a good one, I mean like a Buck or a Gerber, or a Ken Onion. You know, if you get a quality knife, not one of these cheap truck stop $10 knives, but a decent folding knife, I think you'll be just fine, because you shouldn't be using it for a pry bar out there, because you're not in that scenario. You're going out to help your neighbor, to help your community. You're going to do what has to be done, and then you're going to go back home, you know, to your family. So it's not the same, if you get my drift. Now, if all you got are sheath knives, then fine. You know, again, do you have to have a Randall or a Tops or an Essie? No, there's plenty of good knives out there for a lot less money, and they'll do you just well. I mean, the steels, you know, is there a little bit difference in steels? Yeah, a little bit. But in general, if you're going out for a couple hours, you know, a Buck sheath knife or a Gerber sheath knife will do you just fine. Both Gerber and Buck are now making some full tang models. There's the Buck is making one called the Pursuit series, and Gerber has the Strong Arm series. I haven't used those yet, but I may get one and try them out. You don't need any more than that. And so what I'm trying to say in this Minuteman series is, you know, this is not about spending top dollar for everything. It's getting good enough for what you need to do. Now, if you got the money to spend, then by all means do it. But in general, you know, get what you need. You know, this Spyderco I got, yeah, it's got a fancy steel, but it was one of these, I got it on sale, and it was, well, it was cheap. It was about the price of a regular Paramilitary 3, but it was a higher quality steel, so I grabbed it. But you know, you don't have to break the bank. You know, just get what you need. There's plenty of good stuff out there. You know, if you're gonna do the pocket knife, there's nothing wrong with Swiss Army knives. They're cheap. It's good steel. It's a good knife. I've used them for almost 50 years now. It's one of those things. I've always had a Swiss Army knife. And like I said, I carried one all throughout the Army. I have all the knives I had in the Army. I carry that Swiss Army knife, that Farmer, every day. And that's like my second or third one of those Farmers. It's a great knife. I just don't carry them today because they're just a little bit too big, and I don't need all that stuff anymore. If you need a lockback, a Buck is fine, a Gerber's fine. You know, some of the Spydercos are fine. They're starting to get a little pricey, but you can get a quality knife out there. So don't try to break the bank. Try to get yourself geared up the best you can, and be prepared to help your family. Be prepared to help your community. So this is it for the knife part of the Minuteman series. I hope you enjoyed it. There will be more to follow. Please comment if you feel the need. If not, give me a like, subscribe to the channel. We are going to put some more out as time goes on in the future. So that's all I got for today. Stay safe and stay secure, and if you're in the Southeast, stay dry. We'll see you.